During World War II, Germany pinned its hopes on this Wunderwaffe, a so-called miracle weapon meant to turn the tide. As the world's first long-range guided missile, the V-2 rocket promised victory from the skies, but like most of these miracle weapons, it didn't quite live up to the hype. But could we finally be on the verge of witnessing a real Wunderwaffe, one that actually lives up to its legend? And if that's the case, could it emerge on the brutal front lines of the Russia-Ukraine war? Actually, the American M1 Abrams tanks were supposed to be such a miracle, but a line from a song in the famous detective novel perfectly explains why they are not. 9 little soldier boys sat up very late, one overslept himself, and then there were 8. Here's what we mean by that. While Washington was deciding on the transfer of tanks to Ukraine, the Russians simply mined more than 80,000 square miles and created several lines of defense with trenches and dugouts for hundreds of miles. Now, not even a skinny mouse can get through there. This is probably why the American M1 Abrams is not a Wunderwaffe, although it definitely strengthened the Ukrainian army. The German Leopard and British Challenger suffered the same fate. Okay, tanks may just be heavy chunks of metal, even though they did become a game changer in World War I. But the United States also provided Ukraine with some of the best artillery systems and the most accurate ammunition to fight Russia. And at first, it was a Wunderwaffe to die for. We're talking about the times when Ukraine received M982 Excalibur artillery shells, and instantly they became the favorite weapon of the soldiers. Thanks to GPS navigation, these $100,000 munitions had incredible accuracy and were even used in urban battles. To do so, it uses steerable stabilizers that open immediately after launching from the M777 howitzer. Unlike tanks, the Excalibur ended up in Ukrainian hands in a very timely manner. The same thing happened with the American HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems, which were used by the Ukrainian military just 4 months after the start of the war. Dozens of Russian ammunition depots were blown up, hundreds of pieces of equipment burned down or turned into a colander. It seemed that here it was, the Wunderwaffe. After all, a single strike of high accuracy from an American precision weapon could replace a volley of 50 conventional artillery rounds. But a year passed, and in March 2023, Excalibur suddenly began to miss targets. The percentage of successful hits dropped to less than 10%. Almost the same thing happened with the GPS-guided GMLRS missiles, capable of hitting targets at 50 to 80 miles. By the way, the career of the American high-precision smart bombs JDAM and JDAM-ER lasted even less time, and then there were none? The American superweapon is no longer the Wunderwaffe. In the Pentagon, of course, everyone was shocked. In the Senate, too. The reason behind it? The Russian electronic warfare. David T. Pine Esquire, a former U.S. Army Combat Arms and HQ staff officer with an MA in National Security Studies from Georgetown University, claims that Russia has the most effective electronic warfare systems in the world, with the most extended range and most powerful GPS and radio frequency jammers of any country. Russian success has been so profound that General Charles Q. Brown Jr. is convinced the United States needs to change its approach to electronic warfare and strengthen the relevant systems. Why is it so? To put it simply, precision munitions like Excalibur, JDAM, and HIMARS rely on GPS, but when it's jammed, they lose accuracy. Smart munitions use backup inertial systems, but these have a 5% error that grows with distance. For Excalibur, this small deviation is critical, which is why the US no longer supplies them to Ukraine. JDAMs are less affected, but Ukraine will need way more fighter jets to get close to Russian defenses. HIMARS with cluster munitions can still hit targets, but now require complex operations, including taking out Russian electronic warfare first. Well, perhaps then we can call Russian electronic warfare the Wunderwaffe of this war, right? No, not at all. First, electronic warfare is tedious. Secondly, according to the independent Oryx project, since the beginning of the war, Ukrainians have destroyed or damaged at least 84 units of the jammers and deception system. This means that this phenomenon can be dealt with very effectively. Thirdly, Ukrainian electronic warfare also interferes with Russians. That is, these weapons are not exclusive. Of course, Ukrainians are inferior regarding the variety and number of jammers and deception systems, but they can already create a so-called interference dome in certain areas of the front line. For example, when the Ukrainian assault forces broke through the border in the Kursk region, several Russian units found that their drones and communication systems were not working. The Ukrainians managed to jam Russian equipment and prevent Russian troops from identifying Ukrainian positions or intercepting their communications. This contributed to the success of the cursed operation. Hopefully, you've already seen our video about the first hours and days of this crazy military adventure, which will be included in the textbooks of military schools anyway. As for electronic warfare, we're likely to see parity in jammers and deception systems between Russia and Ukraine soon, and electronic warfare equipment will be available to every soldier, if not every unit, on both sides. This contradicts the very idea of Wunderwaffe. The miracle weapon must appear at the right moment and unexpectedly. It has to be exclusive and have a decisive impact on the war's outcome, just like Ukrainian sea drones did. Packed with electronics and explosives, Ukrainian USVs rushed to meet Russian ships. As a result, we have the first instance in the history of warfare where a country without its own fleet wins a naval battle. 25% of the Russian Black Sea fleet has been destroyed, and the remaining warships that survived are hiding in the bays hundreds of miles away from their home base. And these surviving ships must constantly maneuver, because a flock of small, cheap sea predators can damage and even sink the most modern ship, which costs hundreds of millions of dollars, in a few minutes. In this naval battle, even the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the cruiser Moskva, was sunk, and the formidable Admiral Makarov was damaged. To discover how Ukrainian drones took down 22 Russian ships, check out the video in the info card. But as impressive as these naval victories are, they're not enough to secure a win on land, which is why sea drones can't be called a true Wunderwaffe. What can be then? We can get the hint from legendary Ukrainian General Zaluzny. In an interview with The Economist, he compared the battlefield to the First World War, implying that breaking the deadlock in the Russia-Ukraine war will require a technological leap as revolutionary as the Chinese invention of gunpowder. Zaluzny was likely hinting at cutting-edge innovations in drones, robotics, electronic warfare, and anti-artillery systems, along with advanced demining equipment. That's why Ukrainian soldiers are constantly experimenting with various technologies. These are not scenes from Game of Thrones, but a real attack on Russian infantry positions. Ukrainians call this weapon the Wings of Vengeance. The global press refers to it as the Dragon Drone. The key component of the Dragon Drone, which has caused a stir on the battlefield, is a thermite mixture made of aluminum powder and iron oxide. Its primary advantage is accuracy. The mixture is likely ignited by an electric detonator. A fiery rain reaching temperatures of 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit can burn through any material, even steel. By dousing enemy positions with fire, Ukrainians render them unusable, forcing Russian troops to retreat. According to international law, thermite and its mixtures are not banned in warfare, but their use against civilian targets is prohibited. That's why Ukrainian operators use Dragon drones with precision far from populated areas. Russian forces, using their TOS systems, are less selective and accurate. When fire rains down from the sky, like from a dragon's mouth, it has a powerful psychological effect. However, experts are cautious about declaring Dragon drones a decisive advantage. They are unlikely to replace mass FPV drones or aircraft for strikes against infantry and equipment. Moreover, the aluminum powder and iron oxide mixture has been used since the Great War and later in World War II. This technology isn't new, making it easy to replicate. Due to the availability of basic technologies, it's expected that Dragon drones will also appear in the Russian army. Therefore, they cannot be considered a Wunderwaffe, which is characterized by breakthrough technology. An example of such a breakthrough could be the new Ukrainian weapon called Palianytsia, which is already proving to be highly effective on the battlefield. Recently, Putin has been stunned by a new series of explosions. The largest ammunition depots in Russia were blown up. Tens of thousands of tons of shells and missiles continue to detonate even a day after the attack. According to some reports, this was the debut of Palianytsia. Eyewitnesses say they heard the sound of a jet engine before the explosion, like a rocket. However, Kiev officials claim that Palianytsia is kind of a botch, a missile and drone hybrid. It has a range of up to 435 miles. In addition to arsenals, about 20 Russian airfields are within the Palianytsia's range. This is probably a maneuverable drone with a jet engine. Such a scheme makes Palianytsia inexpensive, stealthy, accurate, and powerful enough to carry a heavy warhead. Well, the example of the Ukrainian maritime USVs shows that Ukrainians are outstanding at drones. Will Palianytsia become the same Wunderwaffe, only on land? We believe this beast could be a real game changer, but we're eager to hear your thoughts in the comments.